Welcome back to another episode of Hungry for the Word. I'm your host, Tommy Vento, with my lovely co host, Julie Vento. Today, we're going to be talking about how God is a heart God. Um, he is obviously multidimensional, omnipresent. He's more than what can be described. But while we may have alluded to it in previous episodes, um, he it's so evident when you read the word again through this lens of seeing him as a heart God to find countless pieces of evidence where he's telling us about himself or others are describing him. And it's just all about love, all about the heart. And David, a man after his own heart, was, I think, one who recognized how much God's love outweighed any of his really poor behavior. And God was so flattered that David understood that it was about God, not about David's mistakes. That is part of, I think, why David reached the standing that he did and is as important of a patriarch as he is, and partly why Jesus is directly descended from the house of David, is he must be of the line of those who understand my heart. And so when we were talking about this beforehand, what kind of came up for you when you think about he's a heart God?
I think what first came up is First Thessalonians 5:23, where it talks about being. Let me just pull it up. Now, may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely, and may your whole spirit, soul, and body be preserved blameless at
Mm,
the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. And just understanding that we are spirit, soul, and body. And if we're three parts, that, where does the heart fall into that?
mm,
The Lord, I often kind of distinguish between connecting to the Lord with my mind versus with my heart, or with
mm-hmm.
my intellect versus my spirit man.
Right.
So that's kind of what I think of first, is that is where we meet God, is
Mm-hmm.
really in the secret place, which I call the Bible calls it the secret place, but it's the
Right.
heart, it's the internal man,
Mm-hmm.
it's the spirit.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, uh, the word heart and spirit and soul, in fact, are used very liberally and interchangeably
Mm-hmm.
in the English translations, but the Hebrew gives us a lot of clues to what specifically it's talking about when it uses each heart, soul, mind, spirit, etc. And to your point about the three parts, I think the Israelites understood that, being made in his image, and he is the triune God, that we have those levels to us. And I think spirit and heart are like a Venn diagram almost when it comes to the English, meaning there's a truth about what the Father means when he uses each specific one in certain instances.
Mm-hmm.
But for us to recognize the Spirit is that everlasting part of us, but that it's that heart, that spirit where you connect to him as well. And so it's funny, my couple of verses that I had pulled up, um, one of them I'll say is pretty similar to the Thessalonians you just read. This is Psalm 16, 9 through 11. Therefore, my heart is glad, my soul rejoices, my body also rests secure. So it's those three layers. For you do
Mm-hmm.
not give me up to Sheol, or let your faithful one see the pit. You show me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. In your right hand are pleasures forevermore. And when I think about him being a heart God and how much love is, I mean, my heart is glad. I rest secure. In your presence, there's fullness of joy. There's so much joy there when we think about him being a heart God. And I think that's part of why we wanted to talk about this today is the the opposite of that. Um, being evidence of where you don't yet trust him. And of course, we don't say that with condemnation. It's as always, it's an invitation when you recognize that resistance, when you recognize um, the fear in and of itself to change or to trust him or to take that next step and believe that he he's so much bigger than the fear that you're facing. And I know that that almost sounds generic and kind of cliche, but when I read, my heart is glad, my soul rejoices, and my body rests secure, it is this from the innermost being to your outer self, from the tip of your head to the tip of your toes. You are so content, not in a solution or an outcome, but in the nature of who he is. Trust my leadership, trust my love, trust that I want good things for you, trust, all the verses that we throw around at each other. Jeremiah 29:11 or things of that nature. Just, oh, believe he wants good for you. But to know on an intimate level that outside of all the noise, it has nothing to do with people telling you how you should feel and what you should experience. He wants you to experience the fullness of joy in his presence, which joy is more than just happiness. Joy is accompanied by the peace that is beyond understanding. And so that love that he wants to share with you is what I think of when he says he's a heart God and how Paul understood that in the portion you pulled out of his letter. He's saying, may the God of peace and love and joy, all these monikers, may he be with you because that's what he wants for you. It's not, anyways, I'm sort of rambling. I recognize it, but
Yeah.
he
Well,
is such a heart God.
you mentioned a lot of emotions, right? And when we
Mm,
think of the heart, we think that is the seat of our emotions. And it is. That is where deep feelings, not those emotions that just, I'm angry at a car as it, pulls in front of me, kind of,
hmm
not those fleeting ones, but the deeper feelings of the heart.
hmm
They actually come out of our heart and the beliefs of our heart. And that's why, when Paul, I don't know, I didn't look this up, I just thought of it, but when Paul says, gosh, I want to do this, but I'm doing this,
Yep.
or I should do this, but I'm just doing that. That is that's a heart that is in disharmony, right? It's you
hmm
have a belief in your heart, and you might have thought, oh, I'm gonna, kind of transform that. And it might not be in harmony yet.
hmm
So you still by default do what your heart does. If
Right.
your if your heart and mind are ever out of sync, you will do what your heart does.
Right.
That's where your all your action comes from.
Right. Well, and again, how funny the words we're using, your heart versus your mind.
Yeah.
It so much of the heart comes from what you value. I think that's why Jesus says, where your heart is, that's where your treasure is. And if your heart
Yeah.
is for peace, if your heart is for certain things, then that will be your motivation to the action you take. But to, again, almost delineate that logically, I see myself doing this thing that I know I don't want to do. It's
Yeah.
it's I mean, I'm hesitant to use the word sin because of how much we've talked about that. That gets
Yeah.
muddled with rules and behavior, cultural standards. But the sin that you're in and you see yourself doing it, something as simple as, like you said, being angry at a driver who cuts me off, being really impatient while I'm on the road. That's a good generic one. I see myself still in this sin, knowing on a deeper layer that that's irrelevant. I'm unaffected by it. I can, in fact, bring peace to the situation, not let the circumstances throw me from my peace. And seeing that and then being uh, betrayed by a deeper heart belief. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. In fact, it sort of brings me into the second verse that I had picked out. This is from Proverbs 23:26. And again, I think it sums up God's intention towards us as succinctly in one sentence as I can find in the Proverbs. My child, give me your heart and let your eyes observe my ways. It has nothing to do with, come on, behave this way.
Mm,
Come on, do certain things or don't do certain things. It has everything to do with when you said the word harmony, when we have total harmony with his heart, with his intentions. He is unchanging because he is permanently between his own, I'll say, triune being, between his heart and mind. They are perfectly in sync. They don't have a misalignment. And through Jesus, we can step into that which is already aligned. So that's I think one of the biggest benefits of Jesus. I hate to say it like that, like it's a sales pitch, but just from the actions of Jesus, we just get to step right into that has been done for us. We don't have to become harmonious when the sanctification process does take place. And that's what we're talking about. And it's like seeing this fear that I have to, let's just say, give up a habit, because on some level, I put that habit on because it's serving me. At some juncture, I made the conscious choice over and over again to do this thing because it gave me something. And now seeing myself logically not wanting to do that anymore, but not being free on a heart level, again, that's what we're talking about. It's not condemnation, it's not sin to be punished, it's small errors to be corrected. He wants you to stand in the fullness of joy that is in his presence. He wants you to experience the pleasures forevermore. I think it says, in your right hand are pleasures forevermore. Zoomed out from the immediacy that you might feel in a situation where you are struggling immensely, on that layer that you are struggling, he doesn't want to heal you by giving you a certain outcome. He wants to heal your heart towards him on the deepest level. And then you will see and begin to create that new confirmation bias from a heart perspective after you see him come through. Does that make sense?
yeah. Well, when you were talking about that before, about when it's out of balance, in 1 John 3:20, it says, whenever our hearts condemn us, which it will. I mean,
Hmm.
again, not condemnation as in you idiot, don't,
Right.
but as you're persuading your heart to line into this belief and new
Hmm.
creation that you are, there are times where the heart condemns you. It's like, oh,
Ooh, you can't trust him yet.
yeah.
Hmm.
And but he says God is greater than our hearts.
Right.
So again, he is walking us through this transformation of our heart beliefs, the persuasion of our heart beliefs, the ability to put down some of those old heart beliefs that we might have picked up for survival or,
Right.
for
Right.
various reasons.
And
Um,
and it's not a one walk dog. It
yeah.
is not do it once and be finished, which again, that I think is what we would prefer from the world's perspective. It we like the not only the microwave, but we like autopilot. We like things to be programmed.
Yes.
We like set it and forget it. And um, this process we're talking about, it's a lifestyle. It's like gardening. In fact, I was just telling you before we started recording, I totally spaced and forgot to water my garden this morning. And so some of the healthiest plants I have, they can make it to the afternoon, but I have some red lettuce that's relatively new that sadly it is completely wilted. And I'm optimistic that upon noticing this and watering it, we've not lost the lettuce completely. But the, the point being that it's a daily watering of this flower bed. It's a daily thing. And when you don't see that as a burden, you see it as a joy, him taking you through this sanctification. It's not to you, it's for you. At the end of this road, and I know I just said there is no finish line, but at the end of this road is peace beyond understanding all the time. It is all that Jesus has, he gives to you. And it's not like you're earning that standing. That is the natural fruit of the process he's taking you through because he wants it on a heart level. In fact,
Well, just
so
can I say
yeah,
something real
please,
quick about
please.
you said we love autopilot, and we
Yeah,
do. In fact, we are meant, we're created in his image, so there is a lot of autopilot uh
totally.
features to this body, Uh however, that autopilot is from heart beliefs. And
Mm,
so if we constantly are yelling at drivers when we drive, you have a heart belief that's not really probably aligned with your new creation reality.
right.
So the sanctification and the changing of that heart belief to be more in harmony with the Lord, the Word, heaven.
Hmm.
Um, Once it's set though, you're an autopilot again. And
Right.
that's the effortlessness of the fruit you're talking about. Once it's reset, if you will, out of the
Hmm.
programming that we had into his programming, if you will,
Hmm.
that process can be, you know, a little arduous, but
Yeah.
once it's set, you're an autopilot again.
Well, and it's funny. I agree, and I'm thinking of the we've joked my birthday proverb. So
Oh
Proverbs
yeah.
12:12, and it says the very root of righteousness bears fruit. And so it's just this what you're talking about. You don't have to put forth effort anymore. When your root is righteousness, that's what the fruit will be. You can tell a tree by its fruit. And yet, uh, I think this is partly where, because of where I'm at in certain conversations with him, uh, the last verse that I had picked out for him being a heart God is from Revelation, Revelation 2, verse 4. This is the Jesus is says, "Hey, write a letter to these seven churches." And when those of you who are hungry for the word, which we assume you are if you're listening to this show, go look up sometime the uh, Greek translations of what these seven churches' names translate to, as well as some of the different things that he mentions in the letters to each of them. But he says to the church of Ephesus, uh, I know you guys, you've done so well. But verse 4, but I have this against you. You have abandoned the love you had at first. Remember then from what you have fallen. Repent and do what you did at first. And so
Mm.
the caveat, if you will, which we've talked about, it's not two extremes like this. It's a horseshoe. It's they're so close to touching, even though they're extreme differences. The other one is in a true healthy marriage, you never get fully on autopilot. You
True,
you
true.
pursue your partner forever. And that's where I know you weren't saying it in that way. That's what I mean about, some stuff I've maybe struggled with or contemplated in the past week are lessons we visited a handful of times. And I'm sort of wondering in some way, why am I back here? And I'm reminded you and I had talked uh, about the rule of thirds that comes from the there was a U.S. Olympian gymnast, and she felt like she had a day where she was just not doing well. And her coach says to her, chalk this up as one of your one-third bad days. And she's like, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, the rule of thirds. In pursuit of any lofty goal, of any long-term achievement, of any real fruit, you're going to spend a third of your days doing great. You'll spend a third of your days doing okay. And you'll spend a third of your days feeling like you suck. And and what I think you're talking about is over the course of eternity, the ratio of okay and suck days ends up dwindling to like 0.0001% in all of eternity. But for our human experience, that rule of thirds, I think, is just a decent benchmark to know whether or not you are still pursuing him. And so I say that because as he is a heart God, there are people, and I'm not saying this with condemnation. I think there's beauty in the naivete. There are people who go to church twice a year and don't really talk to God, don't really open the Bible, but they go for Christmas and Easter and they think they're killing it. They walk boldly into the throne room in their time of need. And that's great because that's part of the
Mhm.
gift of Jesus and how much more he loves the naivete of the Roman soldier who comes up and says, I know I did all these things earlier today and I've tortured your people, but my son is sick. Will you heal him? And he says, boom, you know me. Son is healed. That this notion of him being a heart God really, I'll say, transcends what we would classify as more than just being right or wrong. But like I said, in the rule of thirds, you have an okay day. Yeah, I'm doing okay in my walk today. I'm still struggling with this sin. I'm still doing that. And days that suck where you're like, dude, I suck. I'm a wretch, to use Paul's words. Or in the other direction, God, what are you doing? Where are you? And it's this anger and all of those things, not to say they're meant to happen, but they can be expected as part of this lifestyle where the heart God doesn't just want to slap a band-aid on it and have you have some money in your account. He wants on a heart level for you to have such harmony with him that you could praise after 3 years of famine in the same way that you could praise because he fed 5,000 people with two fish and five loaves,
Mm.
And so I know
Mhm.
that was a long and winding thought that really comes back to the message to Ephesus. Don't abandon the love that you had for me at the beginning. Continue to pursue me because you will reach new sets, new baselines of
Mm.
autopilot every time this something gets set. And know also that I want to conform you to the image of my son, which is the image of me. It's way beyond, I heard it once taught, you think of yourself as a house and God says he wants to come live there. And so you think the job will be just tidying up the rooms one by one as you go. But he comes and says, no, I'm God of gods. I'm Lord of lords. I'm King of kings. I'm going to dwell in a palace. And
Mhm.
it
Yeah,
took David 20 or Solomon 20 years to build the temple in Jerusalem that he finally felt worthy of saying, God, you now have a home here. How much more so your own body? So, not saying it's going to take 20 years. I'm saying no matter how long it takes, he deserves to dwell in a palace and you deserve to be a palace. And he is a heart God who wants to take you there, not condemn you into acting a certain way, you know?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's beautiful. Well, it also reminds me of when he was using Samuel to find the next king that
Mm,
he had set aside for Israel in First Samuel. What is it? First Samuel 16:7. He'd gone through Samuel went all through Jesse's sons to because he was trying to find the king. And the Lord finally said in verse 16:7, but the Lord said to Samuel, look not on his countenance or his height or of his stature, because I refused him. For the Lord seeth not man as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart.
mm,
And just like you were
love
talking
that.
about with some of those proverbs, that's what he's after, our heart
Hmm.
to be shaped and beating and behaving as his heart does.
Exactly. And and that is heaven on earth. That is his will be done. When you are in a place and your heart is in total alignment with him through the realms, through the heavens, he is in that place. And just his presence alone can move mountains, you know? And so
Mm,
I think, as we wrap up here for time, I think what's bubbling up for me, saying he's a heart God 5 years ago to me would have meant very little. I was so disconnected from my heart. I was so hardened in that way that I remember, we talked about it. I couldn't even really read the Bible. I had to listen to other alternative teachings, other contemporary teachings, other religions and ideologies just to be able to soften my heart enough to be able to sense him and get to know him. And the, the relationship that we have now, I can't fathom being without. And although in the last 5 years, of course, things have changed externally, it's like being relocated internally to more than, a different state, a different country. It's a different planet. And that when you let the word affect your heart, when you let him come in and bring harmony to it, it's not because he wants you to conform. It's not like,
mm-mm,
hey, get on board the program or get lost. It is you're going to enjoy it much more. And oh, by the way, we'll be together as you do.
I love that.
What about you? What do you think of? What do you
Well,
want to leave them with?
as you said that, it's for our benefit. Many times the Lord asks us for our heart. He wants us to walk through this transformation with him,
Mm,
and it's for our benefit.
right.
It's so that we can enjoy this experience better.
Yes. Yes.
And we do. We do.
Exactly. Well, and we've talked about it before, part of the imagery, the multi layers of Joshua taking the promised land is we're here to take that land in our body. On the spirit level, the innermost layer, we've been born anew. We're this new being. You are one with Jesus and of the Father. But on the outermost layer, you can bring harmony to the flesh and the soul so that, how would I say it? You were you were telling me earlier today about a book that has to do with biology and cells. What was that called?
Oh, the Biology of Belief by
Biology of
Dr.
belief.
Lipton. Yeah.
And how in it he's talking about our cells specifically and their both response and impression they can make on circumstances and on creation and on things outside of us. And so I just thought of this interplay that we're at. And when your heart is aligned with him, you become like a master painter, a master architect, a master gardener
Mm,
at this creation interchange. So no matter what gets communicated to you from the outside, the Lord can be there, peace can be there, love can be there. And when you desire to create and speak and say, let there be light, there will be, and
mm,
that's part of, I'll say, the loftiness of what it is he's given us and how understanding he's a heart God and letting yourself know him in that way. It's more than it feels like a disservice to say it gives you access to that. That is an afterthought compared to what you will taste and see of the Lord's goodness when you're there.
mm. That's good.
All right, friends. We'll see you next time. Blessings.
Blessings. Bye.